Okay, so I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share. If you have questions along the way, you can feel free to interrupt me. You can also feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm not great about being able to do the presentation and keep track of the chat at the same time. So if you put your questions in the chat, I will likely get to those at the end of the training. And I did want to leave time at the end of the training for Q&A, especially for the volunteers that have signed up to do voter registration in the next couple of weeks here in Columbus. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So the last time I did this training was the beginning of February, and I was hoping that when I did this training again in March, I would have some more specific information about the primary agenda and the pending maps. But unfortunately, we still do not have set maps. Those are in litigation at the Ohio Supreme Court, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But just wanted to point out that we do have some uncertainties about the upcoming primary election. So we'll quickly go through general information about voter registration and conducting voter outreach. And that includes who can vote. We'll talk about how to do voter registration, both via the paper form and online. We'll also talk about the different ways you can vote, which are absentee, early in person, or on election day. Then we'll talk a little bit about the primary election, and I want to get into some messaging for the specific outreach week that we have planned here in Columbus. So in Ohio, to vote, you have to be a US citizen. You must be an Ohio resident. You need to be 18 by election day, and this is an important age to remember because by election day, what they mean is the general election. So for the primary election, you can vote if you're 17 as long as you will be 18 by the general election date, which this year I believe is November 8th. So if you know any 17-year-olds, they can go ahead and get registered to vote now, and they can vote in the primary election on candidates. They can't vote on issues because those issues aren't a primary election. They're actually the final election for the issues, and those will be decided after May. So if you're 17, you can only vote on candidate races that will be finalized when you're 18, if that makes sense. Another important point is that in Ohio, if you're not currently serving time for a felony conviction, you can vote. This is often a point of confusion because in many other states, there are different rules. So in some states, if you have a felony on your record, you can no longer vote permanently. In Ohio, if you have served time for a felony conviction, you can vote, but you have to re-register to vote after you get out of jail or prison. We have messaging cards on this issue that we hand out at most of our events in case someone is interested in more information about this. So there's a couple special populations I wanted to talk about that may face additional barriers while voting. And one of those is registering people that are homeless or transient. People that don't have a permanent fixed address can vote. They often use the address of a homeless shelter or a local community organization. For example, a church where they receive free meals that knows them and that will accept mail on their behalf. They often face additional challenges when it comes time to vote because they often or sometimes don't have the ID requirements that you need to vote on election day, which would be a driver's license or a state ID. Their option, if they don't have the required ID, is to vote early in person, or they can vote absentee by mail, because you don't need to present a physical ID. All you need is your date of birth and the last four digits of your social. This requires a few additional steps, such as mailing an absentee ballots, having a set address where you can go and pick up your absentee ballot so you can fill it out, and then finding a stamp to mail it back in, or getting yourself up to the Board of Elections for early voting. So there's a few different issues you may want to talk through with a voter if you know that they're transient or experiencing homelessness. Okay, registering college students, that's another special population. And mostly that is because they can choose whether to register to vote at their campus address or at their family's address. And they can decide this at every election, so they can switch up whichever address they choose to vote at on every election if they choose to update their address. So for example, if there's a student that goes to school at Ohio State, their parents live up in Cleveland, they can choose to vote up in Cuyahoga County or in Franklin County. If they choose to vote if they choose to vote in Cuyahoga County where their parents live, then they need to consider how they're going to vote. Are they going to go up? They're going to go home for the weekend to vote early or vote in person on election day? Or do they need to request an absentee ballot so that they can make sure they're getting their ballot up to Cleveland in time? So there's just some additional steps that you would want to talk to college students about when they register to vote, that they'll want to think through and make a decision. They do not have to have a driver's license that matches their campus address in order to vote on campus. And also their federal financial aid and whether or not they're considered an in-state student or out-of-state student does not have anything to do about where they choose to vote. Does anyone have any questions about registering college students? Okay. So the next three slides are split up.
May I ask a question about college students?
Sure.
Do they have to have some proof of where they live?
Well,
on campus?
So what they need to have to register to vote, they need their address, that their permanent address that they're going to be registering at, and then they need their birth date and their social security or their driver's license number. They don't need to include any kind of physical proof though when they send in the registration form.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that was a perfect question, because on this screen is the front part of the voter registration form. We're going to go through this in 3 slides, but it's all on one page when you actually see the form. It's just in order so that everyone can read things clearly. I put things on 3 different slides. So when you use this form, you can use it for people that have never registered to vote. You can use it for people that have registered to vote but want to update their address, or people that want to update their name on their voter registration. So you can use it for all 3 different things. You can use this same form for any voter registering to vote in any county in Ohio. So if you're in Columbus and someone comes in from Delaware County to your registration drive, you can take their information on the same form. Every county uses the same form for voter registration. If they're from a different state, then that's a whole different process, because each state is in charge of their own voter registration and they have their own different rules and deadlines. So if that's the case, you cannot use this form for out-of-state voters. But you want to make sure when you're registering voters that they're checking boxes 1 and 2. They're putting in their name, their house number, their house number and street. Number 8 is the county where you live and not country. A lot of people put United States, but it needs to be Franklin or Licking or Delaware. You need to put in your birth date, and you can choose to put in either your driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social. This is the middle part of the form. This is what you would fill out if you're updating your address. If you're registering to vote for the first time, you don't need to fill out this portion of the form. And line 13 is when you're changing your name. So again, if you're not changing your name, you don't need to fill out this part of the form. The bottom portion of the form, the voter needs to sign, and they need to sign within the dotted lines here, because the forms are then scanned, and somehow if your signature falls outside the line, the computer can't read it correctly. And they use the signature on this form to match your signature when you go to vote on election day. And then, of course, you want to date the form as well. Now, this all is pretty simple information, but when we do voter registration drives, we often find many mistakes filled on the forms. And we've covered some of them, but one that we haven't mentioned is that you need to put in an actual physical address. You can't put in a PO box, because the Board of Elections uses the physical address to assign your polling location. And if you put in a PO box, they don't know, where your location is. You also want to make sure that the voter is writing legibly, because these forms will be turned into the Board of Elections, and the elections employees will do their very best to decipher handwriting. But if they can't read it, they won't be able to put in the information correctly. And then, there can be problems when the voter goes and votes. My recommendation is that after someone fills out this form, before they leave, ask them nicely if they'll hang out for 30 seconds while you just go through the form and make sure that there aren't any problems, because once the voter leaves, you can't make any changes to the form, even if the error is obvious, such as they, put their birth date down instead of today's date near their signature. You can't make any changes once they leave. So if you are returning someone else's form, so for example, and most League of Women Voters voter registration drives, we offer to turn in the voters' registration forms for them at the Board of Elections in person. There are certain rules required with this. The forms must be returned within 10 days of the voter registration form being completed, or whatever the voter registration deadline is. So if you're doing a registration drive on April 1st, you don't have 10 days, you have 3 days until April 4th, which is the voter registration deadline. In Franklin County, the Board of Elections office is located on the northeast side on Morse Road. You can turn in voter registration forms downtown at the Secretary of State's office. That is possible, but sometimes the staff there is a little confused about why you're there trying to turn in a voter registration form, because they don't get many people that turn into that office. So I would definitely recommend going just to the local Board of Elections office. A note here, for those of you that are volunteering on our March 21st week of voter outreach here in Columbus, I am asking that everyone return any completed forms that you get from your sites to my house. And I put my address in here, and I'm sending all of you multiple emails with details, those of you that have volunteered. So you'll get this information multiple times. But we want to make sure that we have a way of quantifying our outreach so that we know how many people we talked to, how many voter registration forms were filled out. And the best way is to get the forms returned back to me I'll also review them again for any errors, and if there's a problem, I'll reach out to the voters and let them know.
I assume that's Southington with only one ing in it.
Ah, probably, yes.
Southington and
Yes,
Worthington, right?
I did 2 INGs. Yeah. So it's my house is off of High Street, just south of like the little Uptown Worthington section.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
I have a question. If a voter registration form is turned in and there's, say, missing information, will someone call them to get the information correct?
Sometimes. I assume you're talking about the Board of Elections personnel. My experience is that it depends on who is reviewing the forms. Sometimes the voter gets a call, other times it's just put in the trash. And a lot of it depends on who the employee is, how busy the Board of Elections is, if they are being inundated with voter registration forms. They often say that they don't have time to reach out to voters. So the best way to stop that from happening is to make sure that you review the form as a volunteer before the voter leaves. And again, when voter registration forms are turned in to me, I review them again and call them if they provide a phone number, or I mail them a letter if I don't have a phone number, letting them know that it wasn't filled out correctly and giving them additional forms to fill out and put back in. Because the worst is thinking that you're registered to vote and then going to vote and realizing that your registration didn't go through or there was a problem and you won't be able to vote.
So we can, if we are doing a voter registration table and say the person has to leave for whatever reason, and we find a mistake, should we follow the same steps that you just mentioned that you do to reach out with a phone call and mail them another form? Would you recommend that?
Yes, and you live near Cincinnati, is that correct?
Yes, I actually live in Warren County.
Okay. So you can, as a volunteer, do that. If you are doing the voter registration drive in conjunction with a nonprofit organization, I would ask them what their protocol is, because they may have a way that they handle situations like that. But you as a volunteer are, I would recommend, if you have a phone number, reaching out to them and letting them know, hey, I talked to you, a couple of days ago at this event and was looking through the paperwork and I realized that, you forgot to sign the form. So I'm going to mail you another copy, just kind of explaining the process. And I think voters are generally quite appreciative of that.
So what's the physical procedure for fixing an error on the form?
If the voter is there, they can fix it themselves. So if they're in your presence and they realize that they wrote their street name wrong, they can cross it off and write the right street name and initial it. If they're not there, you can't make any changes. So it is possible, they don't have to complete a new form if they just spelled something wrong and they want to cross it out and write it again. But if it's something where they're not there anymore, then you really do need to send them probably a whole new form to fill out. There is an exception for when the volunteer can complete the form, and that is if the voter is unable to complete the form themselves. For example, maybe they're quite elderly and they can no longer hold a pen well enough to fill out the form. In that case, you as the volunteer under their instruction can fill out the form. They still do need to sign the form themselves, though. So that's the exception. After the voter has filled out the form, you want to let them know what to expect next. And that would be after about 20 business days, which is about 4 weeks, they would receive in the mail a confirmation from the Board of Elections that they're registered, where their polling location is, and other like relevant information, ID requirements for voting and things like that. Okay, so we talked about how to do voter registration on a paper form, which is what we at the League of Women Voters usually do when we're doing voter outreach events. But you can also register online, and this is equally, if not more important, because when you talk to people at registration events, not all of them have time to stop and fill out the paper form. So you can give them a piece of a postcard and say, hey, did you know you can register to vote online? Go to voteohio.gov. You fill out basically the same information on the Ohio Secretary of State's website. You need the last four digits of your social or your Ohio state ID and your date of birth, and that's all it takes. You can also update your voter registration or change your name online. When we do voter registration events here in Columbus, I often encourage volunteers to start the conversation by asking if someone has checked their voter registration status lately. So instead of saying, hey, are you registered to vote? In which most people will say yes and avoid eye contact and just continue on their way, you can start with a slightly different question, which is, when's the last time you checked your voter registration? And most people will probably say, oh, never. I mean, it's not something that most people think to do. And there's a couple of reasons why we start with that question. One, it's a little more unexpected. Two, the state of Ohio does purge voter rolls every once in a while. The last time this happened was in January 2021. Almost 100,000 Ohioans were taken off the voter rolls. Largely this is done to remove people who have died or moved out of state in order to clean up the voter rolls. Sometimes the league finds that people were taken off the voter rolls that weren't supposed to be. We especially had that problem, I think it was it 2019? Whatever the purge before January 2021 was, there was a problem with quite a few voters being taken off the rolls that were active voters and shouldn't have been taken off. So what we do now is start by checking people's registration. And you can do this very easily on the Ohio Secretary of State's website. All you need is the first name, last name, and the county that a person lives in. And I gave you a screenshot, and this is all that there is. So if I put in my name, which is Elizabeth Grieser, and I live in Franklin County, what will come up is Elizabeth Grieser, and then there'll be an address next to my name. And so if I was a volunteer, I would say, okay, Elizabeth, do you live at 123 East Main Street? And if I said yes, then I'm all set. I'm registered. I have my up-to-date address. If I say, no, I used to live there a few years ago, but now I've moved, then you know that this voter needs to update their address, which you can do on one of the forms that we have. And if nothing shows up when you put in your search, like I put in my name, but nothing comes up, it means that the voter isn't in the system and needs to, re-register to vote or register for the first time. Does anyone have any questions about verifying voter registration status?
I see this is a great site. What about the other sites like Vote 411? Would that be a possibility, or other sites as well?
So Vote 411, which is a league-sponsored site, it's a national site, and it has a lot of great information about voting. What it will do, though, is if you follow the links from Vote 411 when it comes to verifying voter registration status, it'll bring you right back to this Ohio Secretary of State's website, because the Ohio Secretary of State is the department that keeps ownership of the voting records. So this is the most direct place to go.
Do you know of a QR code for that, or is there one?
I believe we have a QR code on, let me see.
The QR code for this particular site? The
Yes.
check register. Oh, that
I would
be-
have to check. I know we have a QR code that takes you directly to the online voter registration through the Ohio Secretary of State's website. I don't know if we have one that takes you directly to the voter lookup, but they're on similar pages, but I would have to look and see what we have. It's possible the Ohio League has one as well, so I'll look through their list of QR codes. Okay, so once you've talked to a voter about registering to vote, if they have time, you can talk to them about their voting plan for the next election. In this training, I am going with the assumption that the primary date is going to be May 3rd. It's possible the primary date could be moved. So if you're watching this video in the future, please double check dates. But as of now, the election day is May 3rd. You can vote in person on election day from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. at your local polling place. You can also vote in person beginning April 5th at the local Board of Elections wrong, but Board of Elections office Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And there are some additional in-person hours the last 2 weekends before Election Day. All county Board of Elections have the same early in-person hours. So that's just kind of a good tidbit to know if you're talking to people from different counties. The third way to vote would be absentee mail-in ballots, and that starts April 5th as well. The last day to postmark your ballot is May 2nd, but you can also turn in your absentee mail-in ballot in person at a drop-off bin at the Board of Elections office. So you can either mail it in or you can drop it off in person. The most questions we get are about absentee ballot applications and absentee ballots. For a general election in even years, the Ohio Secretary of State will mail out absentee ballot request forms to all registered voters. They will not be doing so for primary elections. So no one will be automatically receiving an absentee ballot application in the mail. If you want to vote absentee, you will need to obtain a request form yourself, fill it out, mail it in, or turn it in person. You cannot request an absentee ballot online. This is a screenshot of what the absentee ballot application looks like. For section 3, you want to make sure that the voter fills out the address where they're registered to vote. And then in section 4, where they want the ballot to be sent to. So many people just want the ballot to be sent to their home, which is most likely the same address where they're registered to vote, but they can have it sent anywhere. If they're going to be, in Florida for the month of May, they can have it sent to their address in Florida and vote from there. For the primary election in section 6, you want to make sure that people check primary election. And this is where you request what type of ballot you want. This part is very important because otherwise the Board of Elections won't know what type of ballot to send to you. You'll have 3 options. You can either request an issues only ballot. There will be no candidate races on that ballot, just issues. You can also request a ballot based on a political party. So if you'd like to request a Republican ballot, there will only be Republican candidates on that ballot. If you request the Democrat ballot, there will only be Democrat candidates on that ballot. So those, I don't think there's any other I don't think there's any third-party candidates running in Franklin County this primary election. I'm not sure about other counties, but I believe for Franklin County, those are the only two options for the political party ballots. And then you want to make sure the voter signs and dates it. You can, as a volunteer, encourage people to register to vote and fill out an absentee ballot application at the same time. We will collect all of these completed forms and turn them into the Board of Elections. And you will turn in the voter registration form along with their absentee ballot application, and they'll process voter registration first and then the absentee ballot application. So if someone's interested in voting absentee, we can encourage them to fill out the form at the voter registration drive, and we will take that information for them and turn it into the Board of Elections. Of course, if they want to take the form and turn it in themselves, they are, of course, welcome to do that.
Hi,
Hi.
this is Jean Marie.
Hi.
I'm just letting you know that if they fill out an absentee ballot and they show up at the poll, it will be considered a, oh shoot, I just texted it. Provisional.
Yes.
So I accidentally did that like 10 years ago.
That is a
And
good
I
point. Yes. That is
So-
something you might want to mention, that if they fill out this absentee ballot and we turn it in, then they have made the decision that they are going to vote absentee. And most people are like, fine, that's fine. But if they're not sure, if they're like, well, I may want to vote, I might want to vote on election day, then, just let them know once they fill this out, they need to
Yes.
follow through with it.
it will be provisional
Yes.
and they have to go to a special little desk.
Yes.
So, okay, thanks.
That is a
Elizabeth, I
good
have
point.
Another question regarding that. Can you go back to that slide,
Sure.
please? So with this primary election, you do have to ask for or check a particular party, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I don't know if this ever happens, but if someone gets to election day in November and decides they want to change parties, is that
Right.
something that happens, or?
No.
Okay.
So this is, a lot of people get confused about this and think that by checking this box, they're declaring their political party, and they're not. They're just choosing to vote this particular election, this particular political party. And that will go on your voting record, and that's a public record, and people can pull that record, campaigns and politicians, and send you mail, based on your past elections. There's nothing you can do about that. You can choose to vote the opposite political party in the next primary, but general election, there's only one ballot, and there's really nothing you can do about your past political party history of which primary ballots you've chosen.
But for the primary, when you specifically say which party you want, that's the ballot you're going to receive
Correct.
when you show up. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
But importantly, you don't have to. If you have issues on the ballot, you don't have to declare, you just vote for the issues.
Correct. If you, like, for example, I know Upper Arlington has a library levy. If you really want to vote for that library levy, and you can just vote for the library levy. There will be no candidate races on your ballot. You won't be able to vote for any candidates running for governor, US Senate, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
And that's different than the general, in which you can just vote issues only, but there will always be candidate races on your ballot.
And I do have to say that my dad, back in 19 whatever, was one of the persons that said, no, you don't have to declare yourself on a primary. And that was my father. God bless Joseph Vincent Sudeikis.
And if you want to really confuse the voter if you want to really confuse candidates and campaigns, just every primary, just select a different political party.
Then you get mail.
That's true. Sometimes we've had a few questions from voters who are a little concerned about the whole process of mailing in absentee ballot requests, getting a mailed ballot back, mailing your ballot back in. Franklin County has something called Ballot Tracks, which is a little bit like when you order from Amazon and you can track your package. It's very similar. You do have to sign up for this, and here's the address. You can find it pretty easily through the County Board of Elections websites. But what it does is it will send you an email or a text every time your ballot or application goes through one of the steps. So you'll get an email when the Board of Elections has received your application. You'll get another email when your ballot has been mailed to you. And then you'll receive a final email or text when the Board of Elections has received your ballot and processed it. So I just done that for the last couple elections, and I've really appreciated it, just knowing, okay, my ballot has arrived and it's been counted. So I think that's kind of a nice little service that they've been offering. And I don't think many people know about it either.
So once you're registered for that, you're registered. You don't have to do it every election?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think I've been getting notifications even though I only signed up once.
That's what I think.
Yeah, but that's
'Cause
a good question. I don't know 100% if that's the case. But it makes sense that it would be.
Do you get a message if there was a mistake on your application?
I don't believe so. And I can't speak for all counties. I think what would happen is that you just wouldn't get a notification that your ballot has been mailed to you. So if you don't get a notification, then you could call the Board of Elections and say, hey, I sent this in. Did you receive it? I know that for some elections, the Board of Elections staff was trying to go through and call everyone. But again, it depends on staff and, what resources they have. So sometimes yes, but it's not guaranteed.
Elizabeth, in Licking County, we don't have the automatic notification system, but you can go online and you can find out the same information, but you have to take the initiative to do it.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, and it's not hard at all. I mean, it's really easy. But I don't know that they tell you if there's a mistake. I've never seen that, but.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they said there was a mistake, because I feel like that could get them into trouble then they had to be specific about what the mistake was and how you could remedy it. So I think that there would not be that information. But generally, if you call the Board of Elections and as long as you don't wait until like a day or two before the election, they're very helpful and can kind of walk you through the process and, help you out. So. Okay, so everything I just talked about before was kind of the script that we go through with the voters. We'll talk about registering and then their plan for voting. And if that includes an absentee ballot, we'll help them with that process as well. The next portion is more specific to this particular election, which right now is May 3rd. This is specific to Franklin County, and I made it this way because we are doing this outreach in about 2 weeks in Franklin County. So people may have questions about what is going to be on the ballot. We will have a primary election for candidates running for Ohio governor, US senator, US representatives for Congress, Ohio legislators, House and Senate. I do not think there are going to be any Franklin County offices on the primary ballot because from the candidate filings, only one Republican and one Democrat has filed for each of those county seats. So they will not be on the primary. Same with judges. There will be some issues, which I've laid out here, 2 public library levies and a few township police and fire levies. The sticky issue gets, the sticky issues we have here are with the US representatives for Congress and the Ohio legislators, because that depends on having set congressional and state districts, of which we do not have because those are still tied up in litigation. So it is impossible to tell a voter exactly which House district they will be voting in and which US representative they will be voting in. But I would just keep the conversation very general and say this is who you can expect to see on your primary ballot. Okay, so we pretty much already talked about your primary ballot options and that you'll be choosing to vote along political party lines or an issues only ballot. Okay, timing of voter registration. We need to make sure that all voter registration is completed on April 5th in order to be on time for the May 3rd primary. The League of Women Voters is advocating that the May 3rd primary be pushed back at least a month so that we have time to get the district lines settled. But so far, the primary has not been pushed back. Again, everything is kind of in a state of flux right now. So there may be some announcements this week from the Ohio Supreme Court that could change what I'm saying right now. But right now, as of March 14th, this is the current state of the election. Okay, so for those of you that are working with the League of Metropolitan Columbus, the week of March 21st, we are going to be having volunteers at our local universities and colleges. We're going to be having volunteers at our local library locations, at local food pantries around the county. And we are going to be pushing for voter registration. When we started planning for this week, it was December, and we did not really consider, we didn't, I guess, anticipate that we wouldn't know the legislative lines as of the end of March, but here we are. So for messaging for this week, I wanted to emphasize for the volunteers that we're going to treat this pretty much like a general voter registration event. We just want to push voter registration. And, you know, even if the primary is a little funky this year, the general election is November 8th. There are going to be a lot of really important elections. A lot of important races on the ballot November 8th. So if you want to curve your messaging a little bit toward the general election, that's completely fine. Before you go to take your volunteer slot, please look for updates on the League of Women Voters websites and the Board of Elections. I will make sure to email you if there are any big updates before you do voter registration the week of March 21st. But you can also let voters know that they should be checking the League of Women Voters website and the Board of Elections. The League of Women Voters of Ohio is going to have Find Your District tool where people can put in their address and look up their new state house district and congressional district as soon as the maps are finalized. And another issue we want to push is that if you have trouble voting, and people may have additional trouble voting this year, this election, due to problems with the maps not being finalized at this point, we want to make sure they're contacting election protection. And we have information about that in your outreach bags that you can give to people. So now we're going to move a little bit into what resources and materials we're going to be providing for you at our voter registration.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, please
Just
do.
a sec. I know some of us are not signed up yet for a particular time. Can we still register? Excuse me.
So are you all with the Universal Unitarian Church?
Yeah, we're first. Yeah, first
Okay.
UU.
Okay, and have you been working with
Chris Johnson
Chris?
and Amanda Hayes.
Okay, so I will get in touch with, I have received some communication from them, and I believe that they were going to organize, I gave them some options of some sites, and I believe they were going to do a sign up with get the sign up of all of the church volunteers on their end, but I can clarify that with Chris.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Chris wasn't able to come tonight because he had a bread meeting to go to.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
I'll get in
I
touch
just
with
wanted-
Chris tomorrow and see what the
Good.
best way to get sign up options for you.
Great.
And that's no problem. Chris and I will work that out, and then we will contact everyone that's interested from the church and get you all signed up.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad you all are interested in doing outreach work. So even for the church volunteers, what you'll be doing is you'll be getting a packet, and we might have pickup be at the church for the packets, because that probably will be easier for you. For league volunteers, pickup will be at my house, and I will send you additional information via email on that. But inside the packet, you will find clipboards, and we will have voter registration forms, absentee ballot request forms. We are using this palm card. This is a back front of the palm card. And we specifically did a general one for the primary without dates, because we didn't know what's going to happen with the primary. So this has all the information about voter registration, ID requirements for election day, how different voting options, and then also where to go if you have trouble voting. If you want information on the candidates and the issues, vote for 1-1. If you want information on judicial candidates, which in Franklin County, there won't be any judicial candidates on the ballot, but that's there for you anyways. And then how to register online, check your voter registration. That's all at voteohio.gov. So we have a lot of these cards. Please hand these out to everyone that you see. And then we will have a few other specific outreach cards for people with specific situations, such as felony convictions and voters with disabilities. So election protection, this is a hotline that voters can call. It's open all year round, but it's the phone number is specifically for voting. So it'll be if you go to vote early in person and you're turned away, or if you go to vote at your polling location on election day and you have trouble voting and you have to vote provisionally, but you think that you should have been able to vote a regular ballot, you will want to call this number and you can talk to a volunteer. It's often staffed by lawyers on election day, so you can talk to them and report your problems. This is one of the main ways that voting rights organizations gets data on what happened on election day, how many problems, and what kind of problems were in each precinct. So this is a lot of ways for us to gather data, not to mention, of course, trying to correct the problem for the voter. So this phone number 1-866-OUR-VOTE, we have cards and information on that, and we want to get the word out that people should call election protection if they are having trouble voting. It's a nonpartisan hotline, and it is also available in various languages. So tips for voter outreach. I think that when you do voter outreach, you kind of develop your own style, but it's best, this is kind of what I like to do when I'm doing voter outreach. You have to be friendly and maybe a little more outgoing than you would normally be. I consider myself an introvert, so when I do voter outreach, I have to pull on my inner extrovert, I guess, and start the conversation with people, and be really friendly. And if they say no, thank you, let them go by, but really try and stop people and say, hey, have you thought about your voting plan? Have you checked your voter registration lately? An extremely important point is be nonpartisan. And I have found that it's almost harder to be nonpartisan when you start talking with a voter that you agree with. Like if the voter starts complaining about, this candidate, I can't believe him, he's so ridiculous, have you heard blah, blah, blah. And in your head, you're like, yes, I totally agree with you. And you want to get in there and agree with them. But please, please, please hold yourself back, because one of the reasons that the League of Women Voters is able to do these voter outreach events at the libraries, and that we get buy-in from food pantries and other nonpartisan organizations to go and talk to their customers, is because we are nonpartisan. So whether or not this person you're talking to holds the exact opposite beliefs of you, or they are like your twin, just kind of smile and generally, guide the conversation through the script, and thank them for voting. Just, let them know that their vote is important, and, thank you for being interested in voting. And then, I like to just remind myself that sometimes voter registration can be hard. Sometimes you have a lot of people that walk by you with determinedly not making eye contact and ignoring you, and you feel a little discouraged. But a brief encounter with a voter can spark them to take action at a later date. So if you can get those cards into people's hands while they're walking by that let them know how to register online, that's really important, because they might come across it a day or two later and say, oh, you know what? I'm not sure the last time I voted, maybe I should go check. And finally, I just wanted to emphasize that you don't have to know all the answers. Sometimes we get really strange questions at voter outreach events. It's okay to say you don't know. If they would like to leave their email, I'd be happy to follow up with them. And I think this election, primary election, it's more important than ever to say, hey, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with the primary election, but it's important that voters are registered, that they're ready to vote. And, here's some places you can go to look up additional information later.
I just wanted to say that people, if you have like a League of Women Voters button, or the sign says League of Women Voters, we have a very good reputation. I mean, people come up and thank me all the time when I'm registering voters, because usually they're very supportive of League of Women Voters in general. So that's just a positive thing.
Thanks, Cindy. And I made everyone stickers in the packets. It's a League of Women Voters logo, and it says volunteer underneath it that you can wear. And then your clipboards on the back will say League of Women Voters, are you registered to vote, or something like that. So it's obvious who you're with.
I just have to say that my first time volunteering as a poll worker, it is very easy to be nonpartisan, because you just go, hi, and that's all you have to do. So, I mean, literally the last election, my first time doing a poll worker, that sounds so wrong. It's like, hi, just smile and nobody will really care what your party affiliation is.
Yes. I'm trying to think of other tips. If you, the places that we're going to be at mostly will have Wi-Fi. You'll be outside, but there are Wi-Fi connections that you can connect your cell phone to. And I do recommend bringing a smartphone so that you can look up people's registration status. You don't need to feel pressure to have access to look up a whole bunch of details for people. As long as you have saved on your phone that address of where to check people's registration status, you're set. And the cards will have information so that the voter can look up their polling location if they want that, or any other specific information.
Will we need to bring tables and chairs for this library thing?
So if you're registering at the library knows we're coming. They have given us permission to be there. We need to stay outside though. We're not allowed to register voters.
Oh,
Yes, we're not allowed to register voters in the library because the library is kind of like a safe space where you're not allowed to go up to someone and say, hey, do you want to buy Girl Scout cookies? Hey, do you want to register to vote? So that's their rule on all of that. A tip that the librarians told me is that if you would like to reserve one of their meeting rooms for yourself and the other volunteer during your time, that can be a place where you can take a break if you want, leave your coats, things like that. But you will be outside. You can't stand under their awnings, but you might want to bring a chair. I don't know if I would necessarily bring a table, just because I've kept the materials to a minimum. If you have the, I'm blanking on the word, the
Clipboard.
Thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
clipboard. That's pretty much all you need. So you might want to bring a folding chair with you. But I think that's probably about it. And I'll send this information in email for those at the library, but you can check in with the librarian. And then if you have leftover materials, you can feel free to leave that with the library as well. And normally when we do voter registration events that aren't all on top of each other, like we're doing this week, I have a table and chairs, the league does, that I bring to different sites and we set up for you. But because we are going to, 15, 20 different locations, we just don't have that type of flexibility.
Do you work with a partner or alone?
Right now, everyone is signed up with a partner. If you are an experienced voter registration volunteer and you would like to do it alone, that's a possibility, but right now I have everyone signed up with a partner. It's much more
And
fun to do with a partner too.
And if I don't know my partner, who's going to pick up the package?
So I will send, my goal is by Thursday, you and your partner will receive an email from me introducing the two of you electronically, and one of you will come to my house to pick up the packet.
And I noticed that there was nothing at Whetstone Library. I would not mind doing a little single clipboard voter registration there.
Yes, so we have permission to be at any of the Columbus Metropolitan Libraries. I specifically did not put people at some library locations where I knew there was high voter registration already.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't be there, but just because of, I wanted to
Yeah.
target certain branches and
Right,
make sure we had people
yes.
there. Let me get with Chris first at the church and see where he wants to put his volunteers. And then I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
That was my my question. If we're at First U, who do we go to schedule us? Is it Chris or is it Amanda?
I am not 100% sure. I think it's Chris.
Okay.
But like I said, I'm going to try and get in touch with them tomorrow and work out the details.
He sent out an email that had a link to a survey where you can sign up for times and stuff, but it doesn't say where.
So for everyone that's on this call, I'll send out the recording tomorrow. If you're with the church, I will talk to Chris tomorrow and we will make sure that you are signed up and have a time. But I just want to make sure I'm doing everything through the church the way that they want to do.
So I wonder if it's raining out, sometimes libraries have, like there's a door and then an inner door. Can we be in that area or no? I don't know if all libraries have that. but-
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm not sure. I can ask. I'll try and find out that information for you. And again, if the weather is really terrible and you're outside, like for example, if you're at one of the food banks, you're going to be outside. You can try and reschedule. Like there's no need for you to go out and stand in the pouring rain for 2 hours. We can reschedule another time. So
It's Ohio. It's going to be 70 degrees and sunny.
yes, of course. This week would have been wonderful. It's supposed to be dry and like 60, 65 every day. So we'll see. Any other questions?
Can we entice people with candy?
As long as you offer it to everybody and not just the people who you registered
Yes.
to vote.
Okay. Okay, cool.
But you can feel free to bring some candy if you'd like. Okay, well, thank you for coming to the training tonight. Like I said, I'm gonna send out an email tomorrow. If you have questions that come up later, feel free to let me know. You should all be hearing from me multiple times this week as we are finalizing the details. So thank you everyone for helping to get out the vote. It is much appreciated.
I
Thank you
missed
so much. You're awesome.
I missed the first part of this. Where do I go
Thank you.
to hear the first part of this?
I have it all recorded and I'll be sending it out tomorrow. I have to upload it to
Okay.
YouTube and then you can review the whole thing or the first part tomorrow. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.